This is Part 2 Episode 130. Even Valefor, who coveted the seat of the fourth demon god, didn't have the mood to take delight in Samanaga's misfortune. He wasn't any less shocked than Samanaga. That was a gold foundation knight. And furthermore, the divine tool he was using before should be a shield. Just how did it become a pagoda? Could this gold foundation knight actually have two divine tools in his possession? And furthermore, this was already beyond considering an ordinary divine tool. It was just too terrifying the way it overwhelmed Samanaga. Ever since the start of the Holy War, this was the first time the demonic bear demon god Valefor felt such a threat from the humans. He never expected the Night Temple to have such a powerful trump card in reserve. After attacking their camp by surprise, they even managed to plot against Samanaga. Samanaga lost a huge deal of power this time. Perhaps even 50 years wouldn't suffice to restore his prior peak. He was now filled to the brim with pity. The expressions on all the demon gods on stage were unsightly to the extreme, but they didn't execute the slightest action. The power they put in the prior attack came with an immense consumption for them. How about the Night Temple? What did they lose in the previous raid? Even if unwilling to admit it, the 7 great demon gods did have to admit that the knights had 0 losses. Right, not the slightest loss. The 7 great demon gods all acted personally, but not a single enemy was left. From this situation, only God knew what other trump cards the Night Temple could have in reserve. They were demon gods, and not expendable soldiers. Their fright far exceeded their feelings of rage. No one wanted to be the next to suffer Samanaga's fate. Therefore, they only stared blindly at the sky, seeing the wielder of the divine throne of law and order and supreme commander of the Night Temple, Long Qianying, return back to the dragon-resisting mountain pass. His encounter with the divine snail of sun and moon was really important. The advices he obtained were even more tremendously helpful than the divine snail shield. The need to be strict with himself was, as a sign of light, one of the most important lessons he could learn. Obtaining a divine tool only increased his strength, but without a strict behavior, the sign of light could also become contaminated and walk on a wrong route. Therefore, no matter what kind of force Long Houchen obtained, the most important remained for him to keep his own heart pure, and not let himself be contaminated by anything. Naturally, this implied that he couldn't let this deathly aura pollute his body. He had not the slightest desire to accept the inheritance of the slumbering calamity Elux either. A massive flow of spiritual energy came pouring in, and caused Long Houchen's amazement, because it was all pure, yet not highly concentrated, light essence. In other words, this spiritual energy was like the one already contained in him, and blended with him to perfectly become part of his strength. He had met with such a situation before as well, but it wasn't as intense and massive. He faintly came to understand that this should be one of the benefits provided to him due to the Tower of Eternity's great harvest. After the projection of the Tower of Eternity appeared, Long Houchen also had a foolish look on his face. A red-hot feeling immediately filled his whole body with burning sensations, as if putting him in a half-unconscious state. But his mental force remained far stronger than ordinary people, and so, he could perceive some of the external changes even in this situation. In his mind, the Tower of Eternity was like a living being, and not simply a building or a divine tool. In his struggle with Elux, Samanaga had simply been led by his nose all along. This was especially true in the way that the tower caught the 12 Spectre Kings. Long Houchen felt a palpable greed from the Tower of Eternity. The whole area around the tower frantically swallowed the power of Samanaga's domain, as well as the innumerable spectres inside. And to Samanaga's despair, his all-out effort was totally fruitless. The Tower of Eternity just brought Long Houchen away, and even the fragments of scattered Spectre Kings seemed to have become adamant to follow him back. Because of his close relation with the Tower of Eternity, Long Houchen's grasp of the situation was a lot deeper than Samanaga or Long Qianying. When the 7 great demon gods joined hands to attack the Tower of Eternity, Long Houchen could sense a great disdain emerging from the Tower of Eternity. But it still didn't choose to meet it head-on. From this, Long Houchen was certain that the Tower of Eternity had the capability to resist that attack, but without a doubt, it would have had a massive cost to pay for that. So, the Tower of Eternity directly brought Long Houchen away, and not because of being unable to resist their force, but because it was not worth it. In other words, if the Tower of Eternity wanted to resist such an attack, it would need to consume a lot of its energy. And this consumption would be a lot greater than what he could gain afterwards. Therefore, for the sake of getting benefits, the Tower of Eternity deemed it unnecessary to clash, and took the easy way of bringing Long Houchen to leave through space. The lock of the 7 great demon gods left him without other choices. Only, Long Houchen didn't expect that the process would continue so soon after he opened the arm's cavities. Insight and perception all came fast and also leave fast. Hence Long Houchen would not let go of such a good opportunity. While absorbing the spiritual energy that came from outside, he paid careful attention to the stirred undulations. Even if he didn't manage to break through, this experience would be very advantageous for his future series of breakthroughs. Time passed, minutes after minutes, and noticeably, on the first floor of the Tower of Eternity, a series of golden glows of light continuously shifted from the surroundings to Long Houchen's direction, and continuously blended into his body. A part of it was rejected while a part was absorbed, and at the same time, a faintly discernible brilliant light started to shine on his body. If at that time, Long Houchen had chosen to go for a deep meditation, he would very possibly have constructed in a spurt of inspiration his 6th and his 7th spiritual cavity. But unfortunately, he didn't have such plans for now. Thus, after the Tower of Eternity terminated its transfer of spiritual energy, he awoke from the state of cultivation. Taking a deep breath, his body started to float naturally. Long Houchen couldn't help but exude a pleasant surprise, but after that felt an air of unwillingness. He indeed didn't want to receive the help of the Tower of Eternity, because he didn't want to owe it anything. He went so far as to make the decision not to set foot onto the 3rd floor of the Tower of Eternity. But, he was unable to deny that he could obtain extreme benefits from the Tower of Eternity. After breaking through the 8th step, although Long Houchen never stopped cultivating, to fill the spiritual cavities on his arms was not the matter of an instant. Even as the sign of light wielding the special physique of a God's chosen one, and therefore absorbing light essence much more rapidly than ordinary cultivators, amassing these 20,000 spiritual energy needed the time of about 2 years. After all, the measure of spiritual energy is not a simple number. For instance, gathering a bit of spiritual energy for a night of the 7th step is totally different from gathering a bit of spiritual energy for a night of the 8th step, since the latter is much more concentrated. In other words, the same notion of spiritual energy differs totally between the 7th and the 8th step. It can perhaps be the same in total volume and elemental contents, but the concentration will very clearly affect the wielded power in the battlefield. And that is one of the great strengths of spiritual Highland. After reaching the 8th step, Long Houchen had a total of 5 spiritual cavities, and the speed of increasing his spiritual energy actually became slower than before, because he needed a time of adaptation. Falling down, Long Houchen pressed down both his hands and took a deep breath, causing his figure to float like a feather. The time was already close to daybreak, but the sky was still dusky. His light elemental spiritual energy would really look conspicuous and inevitably make him overly obvious, therefore causing issues to arise. So instead he used very challenging methods to control his own fall. This was all to avoid getting found out by the demons, the main reason being that he didn't wish for them to know that he would need to return to the original location after teleporting to the Tower of Eternity. If this secret was made known to the enemies, strategies will easily be planned to counter him, so Long Houchen preferred to be more prudent. Luckily, he wasn't too high in the sky. His distance to the ground was roughly 400 meters, therefore a series of acrobatics and propelling movements enabled him to lower his falling speed. When he was on the eve of reaching the ground, he then assumed a curling position and put all his strength in his feet to perform a kick. As a matter of fact, his current external spiritual energy was already over 20,000, making this full-powered kick able to cause a huge shockwave and reduce his falling speed. His body landed onto the ground in an oblique posture, and after a series of rolls, he was propelled forward. The gold foundation armor on him having also helped to neutralize a great amount of the pressure from the fall, Long Houchen stabilized after the series of rolls, jumped forward and rushed toward the dragon-resisting mountain pass. His powerful mental capacity showed its prowess in this situation as well, helping to conceal his figure as far as possible during the whole way to the dragon-resisting mountain pass. It was only as he arrived close that defenders from the Night Temple found out about his return. A misunderstanding would naturally not arise. The gold foundation armor on him was a symbol of his status, and moreover, he was the only gold foundation knight that hadn't yet returned. Thus, when Long Houchen arrived in the dragon-resisting mountain pass, high surges of acclamations and countless looks of respects were awaiting him. Large areas of knights were watching Long Houchen with passionate eyes, violently beating the chest of their own armors with their fist as an indication that their respect for Long Houchen was of the greatest order. Grandpa. Long Houchen performed a knight salute to Long Qianying. His attitude became a lot warmer than before. At the time he was attacked by Saminaga, he sensed how Long Qianying was trying hard to rescue him. And before teleporting away, he saw Long Qianying with his own eyes. How could his approval toward his own grandfather not rise from that? Long Qianying had a bitter smile on his face. I don't know what I should say right now. What was that pagoda that appeared and surrounded you at that time? After pondering for a short time, Long Haochen replied, I don't want to hide anything from you, but that's a secret I am not allowed to tell. I can only tell you that it can actually only restrict the demon god of death Saminaga, and no one else. And I am unable to control it as well. It just appeared on its own. I am connected spatially to it, and it was the one that teleported me away. To Long Haochen's surprise, Long Qianying actually didn't keep questioning him. His look became gentle. Is your body all right? Saminaga didn't injure you. Long Haochen shook his head. I am all right, and can return to the battlefield at any time. Grandpa, the sun will rise soon anyway. The demons will probably be launching a retaliatory attack. I have already made my preparations for battle, and am waiting for your orders. Looking at him, Long Qianying became silent, then couldn't help but show a little anger. What order is there to give? Your judgment is wrong. I can tell you with certainty that today, we can be at 70% sure that demons won't come to attack. Didn't you see on your way back? Saminaga's pillar has already lost all its light. This time, you inflicted him with extremely serious damage. His domain of death was torn to shreds by your pagoda. Tell me what's good with you. Your grandpa Yang, and I have already told you to keep your strength concealed to avoid exposing your identity. You kept concealed your abilities they knew about, but relied on the ones unknown to them to gain the spotlight right away. Given that you have 2 divine tools on you, how could the demons not follow you closely? I estimate that before long, the demon god emperor will know about your existence. Yet, how do you want me to keep sending you to the battlefield? You also said that that pagoda could only counter Saminaga. If the other demon gods launch another attack against you, what's to be done if you have an accident? Although Long Qianying got angry, Long Haochen felt instead his heart warming up. He could clearly feel the concern and worries in his grandfather's voice. What? Long Haochen was immediately in high distress. Grandpa, you can't do that. Grandpa Yang, and you should respect your engagements. If you don't let me appear in the battlefield, how am I supposed to gather those 10 million contribution points? I have to reform our team, to make a slaughter on the demon rear. Long Qianying stood up and slowly walked to Long Haochen's front, with an indignant look on his face. His robust figure really looked imposing, and in front of Long Haochen, he gave off the same feeling as an unwavering mountain. Haochen, don't worry. I don't share the same thoughts as your grandpa Yang. You are my blood-related grandson, and my one and only grandson. You are the sign of light, a God's chosen one, and humanity's future hope. If you remain in safety under my wing, when will you become the humans' leader and the leader that will annihilate demons? You need to keep tempering yourself, and rise through hardships, just like you did before. I believe that you have the ability to defend yourself, and to create even more miracles. So your grandpa won't stop you from going to the battlefield. After 2 days of war, you made the enemies cower in fear one after another, making them lose the opportunity to recover a large amount of corpses, and severely wounding Saminaga. This will cause the demon army's momentum to crumble. I will record these 2 accomplishments. As the head of the Night Temple, I have the authority to award you with enough contribution points. So I decided to reward you with 500,000 contribution points, as a prize for having turned the tides of the war in these 2 days. 500,000. Long Haochen was shocked, but also happy, and couldn't help but worry. Grandfather, are you sure this doesn't count as favoritism? Hearing about the opportunity of reforming his demon hunt squad, Long Haochen nearly hopped in excitement. Grandpa, please announce the contents of the million. No matter what, I will definitely complete it. Long Qianying replied, don't place your hopes so high. How could a mission equivalent to 10 million contribution points be so simple? You can rest first. You will be leaving for the sake of completing this mission tomorrow. This mission is not complicated, and you will be able to accomplish it single-handedly. With the status as Saint Knight Head, you will have to join the defense of every of the 5 temple's defensive forts, and accumulate at least 1 million contribution points in every of them, or make a great accomplishment of yesterday's degree. After you finish that for every of the 5 defensive forts, you will automatically be gathered with your other comrades. At that time, all of you will be sure to receive a new mission from the Alliance. Understood. Happiness always comes all of a sudden. For a moment, Long Haochen was unable to show any reaction. Leaving for the other 5 temples to participate in their battles, and reunite with his comrades one after another was without a doubt a much simpler mission than the one consisting on simply gathering 10 million contribution points. And moreover, being able to join his other comrades one by one was more than he could wish. For a moment, Long Haochen was somewhat speechless due to excitement. Long Qianying smiled in reaction. Is it the idea of heading to the Exorcist Mountain Pass to see your girlfriend that makes you so happy? Right, wasn't the Exorcist Mountain Pass controlled by the Assassin Temple the closest to there? This was the place where Caia was. His grandfather's remark lifted Long Haochen's mood momentarily. He didn't try to conceal his current feelings and nodded strongly in response. Long Qianying gave a light sigh. You youngsters really had a hard time. If not for the demons, your grandpa would be in favor of your wedding. Treat her well, old Xingyu really doesn't have a good temper. In terms of seniority in their own temple, Xingyu actually rated higher than Long Qianying. But in terms of cultivation, Long Qianying was definitely stronger in addition to possessing a divine throne. Long Haochen nodded repeatedly. Grandpa, can I depart right now? Long Qianying unhappily replied, you cannot. Wanting to see your wife is one thing, but don't you want to keep your grandfather company a bit longer? Until you depart tomorrow, just stay with me. At this reply, Long Haochen's surging feelings calmed down gradually. Grandpa, I. Long Qianying waved his hands to him. I understand. At your own age, who knows how much more rebellious than you I was. You are already doing very well, but keep in mind that I really care about your safety. You are my one and only grandson. You have to take good care of yourself, not only for the Alliance but also for me. If the Alliance loses you, it will be the loss of a great talent, but if I lose you, it will be the loss of my precious kin. Do you understand? Long Haochen remained silent, and slowly approached him, giving Long Qianying a very big hug. Long Qianying had a smile on his face. After so many years, it was the first time he showed such a sincere smile. He finally realized now that he really had a grandson of his own. Precisely as Long Qianying expected it, after the sun rose, the demons didn't launch an attack. But the demon camp was greatly busy, transferring the heavily wounded troops from the demon emperor legions while helping the dying and healing the injured. But of course, those 3 forbidden spells weren't totally devoid of benefits for them. At least, the non-carbonized corpses were treated as food, and their armies were served a good meal, with the demon emperor legions as the special ingredient. Because of Samanaga's serious injuries, he immediately entered seclusion inside his demon god pillar, and the authority over the demon armies returned to Vale 4. Exiting the Night Temple, Long Haochen and Hanyu were in high spirits since they were finally able to reunite with the others. Long Haochen understood that although on the surface, his grandfather was assigning him a mission, in actual fact, given that Long Qianying didn't even check his current amount of contribution points, Qianying had no way to know in the end whether he would really obtain 1,000,000 contribution points at each defensive fort. Therefore, after departing from the dragon-resisting mountain pass, it could be said they just have to reunite with all their comrades. Everyone was separated for a year and a half already, and his longing for reuniting with them already surpassed everything else by far. Moreover, the first one they were proceeding to was the Exorcist Mountain Pass occupied by the Assassin Temple, the place where Caia was. Long Haochen obviously realized that he had difficulty calming himself down. The strong excitement even caused the spiritual energy in him to fluctuate irregularly, influencing to some extent his absorption of the external spiritual energy. Even so, he was unable to control his emotions. Caia, are you still well? It has been a year and a half. Have your memories recovered already? Can you now remember me? Thinking to this point, Long Haochen was really wishing to grow some wings to rapidly fly to her location. They left the dragon-resisting mountain pass, and although they were heading to the southern Exorcist Mountain Pass, they had to head to the southwest if they wanted to go through the Temple Alliance's territory. After all, the demon armies were glaring at their frontiers like tigers eyeing their prey, and they didn't want to encounter troubles. By going through the territory of the Temple Alliance, with the Exorcist Mountain Pass serving as the natural barrier, they could put their whole energy to hurrying their trip, and proceed quickly to the Exorcist Mountain Pass. Given Star King's strength, it was absolutely no issue for him to carry 2 people, not to mention that Hanyu's body was also of light attribute, his innate internal spiritual energy reaching 80. Therefore, Star King's affinity to him was second only to Long Haochen. With Long Haochen supplying him directly with spiritual energy, he was flying toward the Exorcist Mountain Pass at his fastest speed. Exorcist Mountain Pass. The Holy War had been going on for a year and a half, and the war was becoming increasingly bitter. Within the 6 great temples, the one that had the hardest time with the demon offenses was the Southern Mountain Pass, but the second one was the Exorcist Mountain Pass. Every human defensive fort was under the watch of one temple, and when comparing the Assassin Temple and the Knight Temple, although a gap existed in their global strengths, this gap was actually not very wide. Yet the Exorcist Mountain Pass had a tough time, and that was because of their own specialities. Although the knights couldn't use their mounts in situations of defense, they were after all heavy armored warriors or heavy infantry, and were like a metallic barrier protecting the city. The walls of the Exorcist Mountain's fortress had already disappeared, the war having mostly destroyed them. The mags that were still unleashing magic were fewer than 50, and they were the last bits of magic force the Exorcist Mountain Pass had left. Almost all the powerhouses from the Assassin Temple were standing in front of the enemies, defending the fortress. They had even forgotten for how long they had been defending this position. But by chance, just like the Exorcist Mountain Pass had sustained severe damage, the same went for the attacking demons. In recent months, their frequency of attack was not as high as before. Caia was currently near the Exorcist Mountain Pass fortress, clad in black, and without external armor. Her eyes were ice cold, and after a year and a half had passed, she had already become a grown woman. Her build was more slender, well-proportioned, and one could see on her almost any asset a female body could have. Compared to the time she separated with Long Houchen and the others, the current Caia was much colder. Although it was by far incomparable to the time before her loss of memories, at least the battle before her eyes was now insufficient to instill feelings of terror in her. Xing Lingxian and Xing Yu were on the other side, their complexion visibly very pale. Thick bandages could be seen wrapped around their right arms. In the Exorcist Mountain Pass, they didn't have even one priest, so they could only rely on doctors to treat the injured. One could well imagine the criticality of the situation. Great-grandfather, shall I go? Kawa suddenly turned back to ask Xing Yu. The demons were already attacking the fortress, and both sides were immersed in desperate close-quarters battles. It could be seen from this that the current Exorcist Mountain Pass defensive battle was at its critical point, otherwise how would they have let the enemies come close to the fortress? The main forces of demons attacking the Exorcist Mountain Pass was formed of demonic birds, dual-headed demonic vultures, blazing demons, demonic wolves, as well as a huge volume of dual-bladed demons and demonic eye soldiers. Against such a formation, although they had way fewer powerhouses allocated when compared to the dragon-resisting Mountain Pass, they won in the numbers. And just for these reasons, they had plenty of corpses to serve as food. On the other side was a mix of assassins, warriors and knights, with the knights and warriors standing in the front and the assassins putting all their strength on killing or injuring the enemies. But through the course of the long holy war, a large amount of mags and priests died at the enemy's hands, and the remaining soldiers were having an extremely difficult time resisting the demons. In particular, the attacks from the demonic eye soldiers and blazing demons inflicted extreme wounds to the soldiers. Therefore, many times the Assassin Temple had to organize suicide squads to deal with them. But the demon gods commanding the other side were no easy people either, and had made their preparations on how to respond long ago, forming a specialized unit formed of various powerhouses to target these suicide squads. Just like in the dragon-resisting Mountain Pass, the powerhouses of the 9th step of both sides wouldn't rashly join the battle. They were mainly restraining each other and serving as mutual deterrents, but in such a murderous holy war, this was extremely prejudicial to the side of the Exorcist Mountain Pass, which was already close to collapse. However, the demon god emperor gave the demon armies the order for a prolonged war to exhaust the accumulated human forces, and to avoid by all cost to invade the territory of the alliance rashly. This was because he didn't wish for the human world to be thoroughly destroyed. But this evidently didn't stop their destruction of the forts and damage to the human armies. Compared to their own troops, the demons visibly preferred having the much cleaner humans as food. Xing Yu nodded to Kia, pay attention to your own safety. Yeah. Kia replied that way, and her figure flickered, shifting from the area high in the Exorcist Mountain Pass to the battlefield below. After such a long time passed, she had adapted herself to this place since long ago, and adapted to a lot of matters after her loss of memories. A pitch-black ray streaked across the sky, and carried along a freezing atmosphere, causing the nearby temperature to drop greatly. The black-clad Kia had her purple hair fluttering. The immense sickle of the god of death appeared soundlessly in her hand, and a dense, dark-colored light burst forth from within it. It unleashed an immense black-colored blade projection, as her figure appeared from nowhere. The dual-bladed demons that were frantically climbing on the walls of the Exorcist Mountain Pass were cut down as if they were wheat, and every enemy that entered into contact with that black-colored blade edge were instantly reduced to pieces. Her intense murderous spirit extended, as large areas of lower-ranked demons were directly cut up by her sickle of the god of death. Kia's awakening as a god's chosen one differed greatly from Long Houchen's. The latter's was as the sign of light, and provided a general boost, including the blessing of the goddess of light. As for his affinity with the light element, it was raised to a whole new level. But Kia wasn't the same. After awakening as a god's chosen one, her greatest gain was the transformation of the dagger of samsara in her hand into the scythe of the god of death. Therefore, Xingyu specifically made her stay in the camps for the wounded for a long time, assigning her some simple, assistive work after her daily cultivation. There, Kia saw far too many atrocities that she would never be able to forget. The first time she came, she saw a soldier that lost both his legs and one arm, and pierced his own heart with a dagger wielded by his last remaining arm. The suicide note he left was delivered personally by Kia to Xingyu. The content of this note was, "Nyo Nyo, Dudu, Papa loves the two of you. However, I cannot accompany you anymore. The abominable demons are attempting to invade our homeland, so Papa is defending our alliance with his own life, alongside his comrades. The alliance is everyone's home, an honorable place for Papa to die. But Papa really hates to part with the two of you, and deeply wishes to see your mother and the two of you. Papa really wants to return to those times, letting the two of you sit on my legs, as I embrace you, giving kisses on your little cheeks, and feel your snivel flow on Papa's face. Papa is thinking of you, but cannot last any longer. I wish I could hear Mama's voice. Papa's compensation payment should help to support you as you grow up. You have to remember that Papa's death was for the sake of the Alliance's fight, humanity's fight. Papa hopes he can become your hope. If one day, the Alliance needs you, Papa hopes you could pick up weapons and stand courageously in front of the enemies on the Exorcist Mountain Pass. Your father that loves you forever." After she finished reading the note, Kia remained lifeless for half an hour. After that, all the fear that was in her eyes and heart disappeared. In the camps for the wounded, she didn't fear getting dirty or tired, and did her best to help the wounded. This lasted for a period of 3 months. 3 months later, Xingyu went looking for Kia with a copy of that suicide note in his hand. He told Kia that the compensation payment was sent along with the original suicide note. That instant, Kia threw herself at her great-grandfather's arms, unable to hold her tears. This dark golden spear quite close to the power of a human legendary weapon. But against the pitch-black blade's edge, it was sliced like tofu, and the pitch-black scythe made its way into his shoulder, cutting the whole body in two. Only then did Kia's figure reappear. Besides being at the 7th step as well, the birdie demon was no threat in her eyes. Her offensive power was enormous, to the extent that Long Houchen was no match while still at the 7th step, let alone those demons. The instant right after she beheaded this birdie demon, she felt suddenly an ineffable sense of danger, and turned her posture towards the demon camp's direction. At least hundreds of light rays suddenly condensed from that direction, shooting straight at Kia's direction. These light rays covered an enormous scope, to the extent that even with Kia's speed, she couldn't make it in time to dodge. Not only that, but outside from these light rays also came many immense fireballs falling like a torrent. Quite obviously, that birdie demon was just a bait. After being baited out from the Exorcist Mountain Pass scope, she suffered a surprise attack, coming from the union between demonic eye soldiers and blazing devils. There were at least 200 which attacked right after Kia appeared. Kia had already rampaged quite a few times in the area of Exorcist City, and every time she appeared, the demons suffered immense damage. The count of powerhouses of the 6th step, or above that died in her hands was already close to 100, including 3 that were at the 8th step. Such a damage attracted the demon's attention a long time ago, and at the same time, gave her great military glory. In front of these aggregated darkness elemental attacks, Kia didn't show the slightest panic. Assuming a crouch, she was immediately surrounded by a hazy black fog. The sickle of the god of death was raised high above her head, and made a sudden hacking motion. Right, Kia didn't dodge, but made instead such a simple motion. One could clearly see that the instant the sickle of the god of death reached the ground, Kia disappeared suddenly, along with her weapon. Only an immense projection of her blade's edge was left. The sky around her suddenly distorted, and the large amount of incoming magic rays scattered in all directions due to the distortions, and at the same time that immense blade edge pierced through the sky, repelling all the other projectiles in the air. This was the power of the sickle of the god of death. Although Kia was only at the 7th step, she could, by relying on it, deploy on a small scope a power similar to a domain, influencing all the enemy's attacks. The sickle of the god of death had a lot of features, among which the most powerful two are overwhelming power and purity. Overwhelming power is just as mighty as it sounds. It's a sharp aura of death that forcibly repels and nullifies any magic which would get in front of the sickle. Kia's figure reappeared, with a pair of spiritual wings that became a lot larger than before, bringing her back to the city's head. Although she really wanted to kill these magic-wielding demons that were gathered below, her reason told her that this wasn't a good idea. Right when Kia was about to turn towards the city's head, she suddenly came to a standstill. Immediately, she had a sort of sticky feeling, which was really uncomfortable. She felt sluggish, and felt her spiritual energy being instantly compressed greatly. What's happening? Kia was greatly shocked, and instinctively poured her spiritual energy into the sickle of the god of death. Right that instant, a black dot could be seen, aiming at her forehead. This black dot was extremely fast, to the extent of being invisible to the human eye. Moreover, Kia was in a restricted state, and was unable to devote herself entirely to defending against it. An enemy's surprise attack. This was Kia's first thought, but the most shocking was that her perception and the murderous spirit of the sickle of the god of death were actually not able to detect the presence of this enemy. This thought only flashed through her mind, and all she could do was to wield the sickle of the god of death in a defensive posture. Then, the scythe of the god of death abruptly burst out with an incomparably dense killing intent. A small crack formed suddenly on the formless domain of viscosity, and her weapon went through it. Against Xingyu's expectations, the enemy that had ambushed Kia actually didn't pay attention to his attack, and maintained the black materialized blade projection's second attack, which clashed against the sickle of the god of death. In this ear-piercing collision, the scythe of the god of death shook violently, producing intense buzzes. Right after breaking away from the sticky domain, Kia was forcibly expelled from the scythe of the god of death. More precisely, in the previous instant, she became one with her scythe of the god of death, uniting their two powers as one. This was one of the powerful abilities held by the scythe of the god of death. Inside it exists a small space, where Kia could hide in times of crisis, and usable to dodge an enemy's powerful attacks, relying on the tough material making up the scythe of the god of death to protect her body. It's just because of the existence of this ability that Xingyu could feel at ease when letting Kia run rampant in the battlefield. But the enemy's last attack was powerful enough to forcibly expel Kia from inside her scythe. Kia's face became even paler. Remaining unscathed from such an impact was impossible, but both her arms had already recovered from the numbness. An ice-cold killing intent was unleashed from her body, causing the surrounding sky to look dusky. An extremely mighty black figure flashed out from her back, and shot out a dark ray passing through the sky. First, one of the 7 arts of the god of death, death in childhood. This was an ability designed for conducting crafty escapes, used to counteract death in childhood. Clearly, the enemy didn't dare face off against Kia's scythe of the god of death. It wasn't Kia's strength that was a threat to him, but the powerful cleansing power of the scythe of the god of death that he didn't dare face. Retreat, the black demon let out a low shout, before stepping away, vanishing in the sky. The blazing lion Alosa also followed, turning into something close to a fire meteor, returning towards the demon's main camp. Xingyu didn't pursue them, but hurried to Kia's side, standing on guard to defend his great-granddaughter, as he vigilantly swept the surroundings. It was without a doubt 2 divine gods that had just came to ambush Kia. For the sake of neutralizing her, the demons went as far as to have 2 demon gods join hands in a surprise attack, and were almost successful. Kia was taking large gasps of breath. Holding back the enemy's surprise attack, and using the 7 arts of the god of death gave her an immense strain, leaving her in a wounded state. As Xingyu was prepared to look after Kia's condition, he suddenly had a shocked look in his eyes. That was because far off, a golden light was flying over towards their area. But its aim was not the Exorcist Mountain Pass, but the only route of escape of the blazing lion Alosa. This golden light was just too fast, and its blinding holy presence made it seem as if the sun was falling down from the sky. Its shining brilliance lit up the whole area, shocking the demons and human powerhouses that couldn't help but focus their eyes on the incoming golden light. From a tiny dot of light, it started to take the shape of a human silhouette. And when reaching a distance close to 100 meters from Alosa, it let out a burst of oscillating orange radiance. One could clearly see a towering orange shield that came to strike at Alosa's direction. Xingyu's eyes opened wide for a split second, during which he made a retreating gesture to Kia. Alossa was in quite a bad shape. Xingyu's previous full attack blow aimed at rescuing his great-granddaughter was not that easy to resist. Despite being a demon god of the 9th step, his 52nd rank made his cultivation rather low among the demon gods. His internal spiritual energy was equivalent to a human in the lower stages of the 9th step, hence lower than Xingyu. And of course, a large gap separated their weapons. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.